Well, welcome back to Whole Bible Study with me, Taddy Noy. If you're just joining us, we've been walking through the incredible story of Israel's deliverance from Egypt. God has already revealed his power through the plagues, shaken Pharaoh's kingdom, and led the Israelites out of slavery. Now that they're free and camped at Mount Sinai, we enter a new phase in the story. God begins giving laws to shape Israel into a people set apart. In Exodus 20, we heard the 10 Commandments. Today, in chapter 21, we start exploring what those foundational commandments look like when applied to everyday life in the ancient world. So let's read Exodus chapter 21 together. Exodus chapter 21, and we're reading from the NIV version. These are the laws you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife, when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not to go free as male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. If he does not provide her with these 3 things, she is to go free without any payment of money. Anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, it is not done intentionally, but God lets it happen, then they are to flee to a place I will designate. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death, whether the victim has been sold or is still in the kidnapper's possession. Anyone who causes their father or mother to be put to death, anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. If people quarrel and one person hits another with a stone or with their fist, and the victim does not die, but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with a staff. However, the guilty party must pay the injured person for any loss of time and see that the victim is completely healed. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But if they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or 2, since the slave is their property. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is a serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death. and its meat must not be eaten, but the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or a woman, the bull is to be stoned and its owner also to be put to death. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or a daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. If anyone's bull injures someone else's bull and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it pinned up, the owner must pay animal for animal and take the dead animal in exchange. Now for the deep dive, Exodus 21. Exodus 21 is where the narrative of deliverance transitions into the formation of Israel's civil society, beginning with the so-called covenant code. This chapter lays down case laws, practical rulings on real life situations that reveal how justice, property, family, and accountability were to function within the emerging Hebrew culture. While modern readers may find parts of this chapter troubling or confusing, the historical and anthropological context gives us deeper insight into its revolutionary nature for the time. The chapter opens with laws concerning indentured servitude, which is often mistranslated or misunderstood as equivalent to chattel slavery. In the ancient Near East, slavery was a broad term that included forced labor, debt bondage, and indentured service. What's radical here is the Hebrew servant's right to freedom after 6 years, verse 2, a concept absent in most surrounding cultures. The seventh year release reflects a broader sabbatical principle embedded in Hebrew law, the idea that no human should be permanently enslaved because they ultimately belong to God. The laws about servants choosing to remain with their families and masters in verses 5 and 6 may seem emotionally intense. The pierced ear was a cultural sign of willing servitude and lifelong loyalty, not ownership in the modern sense. This law elevates the idea that service can be based on affection and choice rather than coercion alone. The next section, verses 7 through 11, concerns female servants, especially daughters sold into servitude. While this may offend modern sensibilities, the law offered protections that were unprecedented for the ancient world. The daughter was not a slave in the modern sense, but more like a betrothed servant wife. If her master or his son rejected her, she had rights. She could be redeemed, could not be sold to foreigners, and was entitled to food, clothing, and martial rights. These laws sought to protect vulnerable women in the patriarchal system, balancing realism and with moral vision. What follows is a series of laws concerning violence, injury, and compensation. This is the heart of biblical justice. In verses 12 through 27, we see that an early legal framework for proportional justice, which evolved into the famous lex talionis, or law of retaliation, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. This wasn't a license for revenge, but a limit on vengeance, a deterrent against escalating violence. The goal was not cruelty, but measured compensation. When you compare this to other ancient law codes, like the Code of Hammurabi from Babylon, you see similarities and differences. Hammurabi's laws were strict but caste-based. Nobility received leniency, commoners were punished harshly. The Torah, by contrast, applied its rules across classes, even to slaves in verses 20 through 27. This egalitarian thrust was radical. A slave injured by their master's abuse could go free. Verses 28 through 36 deal with liability and negligence, especially regarding animals. The goring bull law shows how ancient Israel balanced intent, responsibility, and restitution. If an owner knew the animal was dangerous and failed to restrain it, they were culpable, even unto death. This is early tort law, focused on creating a culture of accountability. And it wasn't just human victims. Property damage, like uncovered pits or aggressive animals, required restitution. In a world where animals were wealth and transportation, this legal structure protected both humans and economic stability. The cultural and anthropological insight here is that the Israel's laws weren't meant to be abstract ideals, but practical tools for living as a holy people. They reflect a society in transition from nomadic tribalism to covenantal theocracy. These laws would have helped shape communal life, resolve disputes, and reinforce identity among former slaves, learning how to live freely under God's rule. One powerful theological thread runs through all of this. God's justice is not only vertical between God and people, but horizontal between people and each other. Exodus 21 is an outworking of the Ten Commandments. It teaches us that how we treat one another, it teaches us that how we treat one another, whether in business, family, or conflict, matters to God. Justice, mercy, and human dignity are not modern inventions. They're ancient biblical values rooted in covenant. And beneath it all is the deeper message: a people shaped by redemption must also be shaped by restraint, mercy, and ethical living. Now for some closing reflections. There's no question Exodus 21 is a challenging chapter, but it's also an invitation to wrestle with what it means to be a just and holy people. I'm struck by how grounded God's instructions are. He doesn't just deal in grand gestures. He cares about the servant, the wounded, the woman who without protection, the child who inherits a bull problem from his father. It's all here. I think what's beautiful is how this text reminds us that God is involved in the details. The laws may feel distant from our modern lives, but they were revolutionary for their time, and they're still whispering a message to us today. Mercy matters. Responsibility matters. Every life matters. If something stood out to you in this chapter, or if there's a passage you're still wrestling with, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. We're still learning together. Thanks for being here with me today. I'm so honored you're taking part in this journey with me. May you walk away today with a deeper appreciation for how much our God cares, not just about our worship, but about how we live, love, and treat each other in the world He has made. Thank you again, and we will see you in the next chapter tomorrow.